My name is Josephine Reyes. Everyone calls me Josie, and I'm 31 years old. 4 days before my wedding, my father called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in my studio glazing the last batch of dessert plates for the reception, hands dusted white with kiln powder, radio humming low in the background, when his name lit up my screen. I picked up with my shoulder because my fingers were covered in clay. "Yosie," he said, "I'm not going to be able to walk you down the aisle." 7 words. That's all it took to crack something open in my chest that I'd spent 20 years trying to keep sealed. I set my tools down on the workbench. I wiped my hands on my apron. I didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity, but was probably 4 seconds. "Your sister's really struggling right now." He said, "She thinks it would be too much for her to watch." My sister, Camille, 34, married, 3 kids, and somehow still the sun that my parents' entire solar system orbited around, even 4 days before my own wedding. "She's going through a hard time with Derek," he added, like that explained everything. I knew about Derek. I knew their marriage was strained, but this was my wedding, not hers. 20 minutes later, my mother called to finish what he'd started. "Just walk down alone." She said, "Plenty of modern brides do it. It's actually very empowering, if you think about it." She said, "Empowering the way people say organic when they've never once bought anything organic in their life." 2 days from now, 200 guests would rise to their feet when the chapel doors opened. And the man standing beside me would not be my father. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. We tell true stories about family, loyalty, and the people who show up when it matters most. If this story moves you, drop a comment and let me know, and don't forget to subscribe. Because what happens next changed the way I think about family forever. I grew up in a small town outside Sacramento called Fair Oaks, the kind of place with orchard views from every backyard and neighbors who knew your car before they knew your name. My sister Camille was the golden one. Honor roll every year. Homecoming court, first chair violin. My parents, Harold and Linda Reyes, showed up to every one of her recitals with a video camera and front row seats reserved an hour early. I was the one who came home with grass stains and dirt under my nails. When I was 13, I built a small greenhouse behind our garage out of scrap lumber and old storm windows a neighbor was throwing out. It wasn't pretty, but by the end of that summer, it was producing tomatoes the size of softballs and peppers, my mother eventually admitted. Grudgingly, weren't bad. That same year, my school's science fair fell on the same Saturday as Camille's regional violin competition. I entered my greenhouse project soil pH logs, germination charts, a photo journal spanning 12 weeks. I won first place. The blue ribbon was already pinned to my board by the time my father walked in. 45 minutes late, apologizing that Camille's event had run long. He glanced at the ribbon. "Nice job. Kiddo," the same tone you'd use with a stranger's child at a grocery checkout. Then he checked his phone. That greenhouse stood behind our garage for 8 more years. My mother called it an eyesore. My father never mentioned it again. It kept producing vegetables every single summer, whether anyone noticed or not. My high school graduation happened to fall the same week Camille got accepted into a graduate business program at a university in Boston. My parents combined the 2 events into one dinner at a steakhouse downtown. 3 toasts were raised that night. All 3 were about Camille. My father lifted his glass to our girl who's going places. My mother dabbed her eyes and said she'd always known Camille was destined for something big. Nobody mentioned my diploma. I'd graduated with a 3, 8 gigapascals and an acceptance letter to a ceramics and fine arts program at a state university paid for with money I'd saved myself from 3 years of weekend shifts at a pottery studio downtown, where I swept floors and loaded kilns in exchange for lessons. When I told my mother I wanted to study ceramics, she set her coffee cup down slowly, like she needed a second to process what language I was speaking. That's not a real career. Yosi, 5 words. She said them to my face once. And as I'd learned years later, repeated them to half the neighborhood behind my back. Camille's tuition was covered in full by my parents, $19,000 a year. I know the exact number because my mother mentioned it at a family dinner the way other people mention the weather. My own tuition. I paid for myself studio work, student loans, and a lot of ramen. Nobody announced my balance at the table. Nobody asked. Camille married a man named Derek Whitfield 3 years after grad school. He worked in commercial real estate, wore a watch that cost more than my car, and my parents lit up around him like he'd personally invented success. Then came the kids Nora, now 6, and Theo. 4. My father retired the same year. Theo was born. And those 2 kids became the entire axis of his world. He drove out to Camille's house 3 times a week. He built Nora a treehouse. He read Theo the same picture book so many times he had it memorized. Camille noticed. She noticed the way you notice a lever you can pull whenever you need something. The first time she used the kids as leverage was over where to host Easter. She wanted it at her place. My father agreed instantly, overriding a plan my mother had already made. The second time was about a family portrait. Camille wanted it retaken without me in it because she said it throws off the whole composition. My father asked me to step out of frame so it wouldn't cause an argument. The third time, I heard it with my own ears. I was in the kitchen refilling a water glass, and my father didn't realize I was still in the room. If you walk her down that aisle, Kemi said, her voice flat and calm through the phone speaker, I'm not bringing the kids to Thanksgiving. I mean it. Dad, it's too much for me right now. With everything going on. There was a long pause. I could hear my father breathing. Okay, Cam, he finally said. Okay. My mother walked into the kitchen 30 seconds later, saw the look on my face, and knew exactly what I'd heard. She didn't apologize. She's their mother. Harold, don't push her on this. That was the hierarchy in my family. Clear as a diagram, Camille first. Then the grandchildren. Then my parents' own comfort. Then, somewhere far below all of it, me. I met Marcus Ellery on a Thursday morning 3 years ago. I was delivering a custom set of dinnerware to a restaurant that was under construction. And he was the site foreman overseeing the build. We both showed up before sunrise. We both drank terrible coffee out of paper cups. He watched me carry 2 heavy crates out of my van by myself and walked over without being asked. Need a hand? I've got it. I know. But my coffee's done, and I'm bored. That was the first sentence Marcus Ellery ever said to me that had nothing to do with construction schedules. Our first date was a walk through a botanical garden followed by tacos from a food truck in a parking lot. He had sawdust on his boots. I had clay dust on mine. It remains, to this day, one of the most natural evenings of my life. 2 weeks later, he introduced me to his father, Salvatore. Everyone calls him Sal Ellery, 65 years old. A retired metal worker with hands like weathered leather. He'd lived alone since his wife passed from cancer 6 years earlier. In the same house they'd bought together 30 years before. His garage doubled as a workshop. And there was always a radio somewhere playing old blues records at a volume just below annoying. Sal called me kid by our 3rd meeting. By the 2nd month, he'd welded me a custom stand for my pottery wheel out of scrap iron. Sanded, smooth, no sharp edges anywhere. He etched my initials into the base plate small enough that you'd miss them unless you knew exactly where to look. You've got clay under your nails. He told me the first time he saw my studio, means you made something today. Nobody in my own family had ever said something like that to me. Marcus proposed in that same botanical garden on a September evening when the maple trees were just beginning to turn. He got down on one knee beside a stone bench. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. That night, I called my parents. My father picked up on the fourth ring. I told him the news. There was a 3-second silence. And then congratulations, not I'm so happy for you. Not tell me everything, just the word you'd use for a coworker's promotion. My mother took the phone next. Is he from a good family? Not, are you happy? Not a single question about the ring, or the garden, or the moment, just his family's resume, like she was screening a loan application. He is, I said, his dad's a metal worker. Silence, the kind where you can practically hear someone deciding not to say what they're actually thinking. I hand-delivered the wedding invitation myself, an original design I'd made with pressed flowers on the inside flap. I left it in their mailbox because I didn't want to watch them open it. I also asked my father to walk me down the aisle. He said yes almost too quickly. The way someone agrees to hold open a door without really thinking about it. Marcus said what he always says whenever I give my family one more chance they haven't earned. You know who they are. Joe. I know. I told him I just want to give them one more shot. He never once told me what to do about my own parents. He just made sure I had somewhere soft to land when it went wrong again. The call came 4 days before the wedding. That Wednesday afternoon in my studio, my father backed out because it would upset your sister. My mother called 20 minutes later to reinforce it, dressed up as empowerment. I asked my father one direct question before hanging up. Did Camille threaten you with the kids again? Silence. Then, quieter, like he was afraid someone might overhear him admitting it. She said, if I walked you, she wouldn't bring Nora and Theo to Thanksgiving. There it was. The same lever she'd pulled for years. And he folded to it every single time, without fail. His own grandchildren, traded for his daughter's wedding day. And he made the trade without blinking. Okay, Dad, I said, and I hung up. My hands didn't shake. I wanted them to. Shaking would have meant I was surprised. I wasn't. I was just finally completely done pretending I might be. Marcus found me 20 minutes later sitting on my back porch. Phone still in my hands, like something I wasn't sure I wanted to keep holding. He didn't say, I told you so. He just sat beside me, put his arm around my shoulders, and waited. The next morning, over scrambled eggs. He asked me the only question that mattered. Not let me fix this. Just what do you want to do? I don't want to walk alone. Then you won't. He set his coffee down. Dad's been practicing his tie knot since we got engaged. I caught him watching tutorials on his phone last Sunday. I laughed for the first time in almost 24 hours. I can't ask him to do that. It's too much. Joe, that man welded you a stand for your pottery wheel he didn't have to make. He drives 40 minutes to your studio on weekends to fix things you never even asked him to fix. He's had a seat set for you at Sunday dinner since 2 months after we started dating. And he's never once taken it away. Something cracked open in my chest, not pain this time. Something warmer. The realization that the person I needed had been standing right there for 3 years, welding metal in his garage, calling me kid, showing up for everything my own father had quietly skipped. Okay, I said, I'll ask him today. My best friend and maid of honor, Priya, called an hour later. She'd run into Camille getting her hair done that morning. Small towns have long memories and even longer grapevines. Your sister was there, Priya said, and she was not being subtle about it. What did she say? She told her stylist, your wedding is making everything all about Josie again. Direct quote, it's like the rest of us don't even exist anymore. I nearly dropped the phone. Me, the one who won a science fair to an empty front row, the one whose graduation became a footnote to somebody else's acceptance letter, the one whose career got called not real by her own mother. She also said your pottery business isn't real work. Priya added, and there it was, my mother's exact phrase, passed down through my sister's mouth like a family recipe nobody had asked for. She's not upset about the wedding. Priya said gently, she's jealous. You have Marcus. You have a business you built with your own hands. You have a life that doesn't need her approval to feel whole. And she can't stand it. I sat with that for a long moment. Priya is right about most things. She was right about this too. I should mention Thanksgiving from the year before. Camille hosted because my mother insisted her dining room was bigger. Derek sat at the head of the table checking his phone 11 times during dinner, I counted. Because I was sitting directly across from him with nothing else to look at while my mother talked at length about kitchen renovations. Camille was loud that night. Not normal loud, the kind of loud where someone is trying to fill a room so nobody notices the silence underneath it. She laughed at things that weren't funny. She kept refilling glasses that were still half full. Then little Nora, 5 years old at the time, mashed potatoes on her chin, said clearly and without any awareness of what it meant, why does Daddy sleep on the couch? The table went quiet. Derek looked up from his phone. Camille's face did something I'd never seen it do before. It folded. Not embarrassment, something underneath that. My father cleared his throat and asked Theo if he wanted more rolls. But I saw Camille's hands as she poured her wine. A small, unmistakable tremor. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Then she straightened, smiled, and passed the cranberry sauce like nothing had happened at all. I understood something that evening. Camille's marriage wasn't going through a rough patch. It was going through the floor, and instead of dealing with it, she was rearranging furniture on top of the cracks. My wedding was just the next piece of furniture she needed to move. 2 days before the wedding, I drove out to Sal's house, a small ranch-style place at the end of a quiet road. Workshop attached to the garage. Always smelling like flux and warm metal, he was welding a garden gate when I pulled in. Sparks arcing off in small orange bursts. I stood at the garage door for a good 10 seconds before he noticed me and lifted his visor. Hey, kid, he said, then caught something in my expression and set his tools down immediately. My dad backed out of walking me down the aisle. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't ask why. And he didn't offer an opinion about my family. He just looked at me steadily and said 5 words. When do you need me? No hesitation. No, are you sure? No, let me think about it. He'd been welding a garden gate 1 second. And the next breath he was offering to walk me into my future like it was already circled on his calendar. Saturday, 1 o'clock. I'll be there at noon. He picked his tools back up, then added, quieter kid. I've been waiting for someone to ask me that. I cried in the car the whole way home. First time all week. The next 48 hours moved fast. Priya handled logistics with the calm of someone who's organized 3 baby showers and once pulled off a surprise party during a snowstorm. The seating chart got updated front row. Center aisle, now labeled Salvatore Ellery. The seat my father was supposed to fill. Marcus took his dad suit shopping. Sal had an old blazer from a decade ago he swore still fit. It did not. Marcus texted me a photo from the dressing room Sal in a new charcoal suit, looking proud and deeply uncomfortable at the same time, rough hands sticking out of pressed cuffs like they belonged to someone else entirely. He's asked me 3 times if the tie is straight. Marcus wrote underneath, "I wrote my vows that evening in my studio." The welded pottery stand to my left. A small iron trivet Sal had made for our wedding gift, one he thought I didn't know about, sitting to my right. My parents didn't call. Not Thursday. Not Friday. No texts either. I checked my phone twice Friday night, then put it in a kitchen drawer and left it there. I didn't tell my parents about Sal. I let them assume I'd be walking alone. Let them find out when those doors opened. The Thursday before the wedding, there was a knock at my door. It was Marta Delgado, 69. Silver hair always pinned back, who'd lived 3 houses down from my grandmother for over 40 years. When my grandmother, Rosalind, passed away 9 years earlier, Marta had been the one who sat with her at the very end. Marta was holding a worn envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you." She said, the week before she passed, told me to hold on to it until you got married. Her eyes were wet. "I've been carrying it 9 years. Yosi, I was starting to wonder if I'd outlast the chance to give it to you." I opened it at my kitchen table. My grandmother's handwriting on the front, just my name. The letter was short. Rosalind was never one to waste words. "Josie, when you read this, you're about to walk into the most important room of your life. And I wish more than anything I could be standing there beside you. I wish I could tell your mother to sit down and let you shine for once. I wish I could tell your father to look up from whatever's distracting him and finally see you clearly. But I knew that family better than anyone. So let me say now what they likely won't. You have always been the one who builds things out of nothing, from that little greenhouse to whatever you're building today. Don't wait for them to notice it. The people who show up for you again and again, without being asked, those are your real family. I love you always. Go build something beautiful. Grandma." I read it 3 times, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the small clutch I'd be carrying Saturday. Family is who shows up. The rehearsal dinner Friday night had 30 guests. Sal drove in early and immediately started helping the caterers reposition tables because, in his words, somebody was about to drop that thing. My side of the room included Priya, my college roommate, Denise, 4 women from the community pottery class I teach on Sunday afternoons, Marta, and nobody from my immediate family. Sal stood up for a toast. He held his glass the way he holds a welding torch, steady, deliberate. "I'm not a man of many words." He said, "Ask my son. He'll back me up." Light laughter around the room. But I'll say this. 3 years ago, a woman showed up at one of my job sites hauling 2 heavy crates out of her van without asking anybody for help. I liked her immediately. He looked over at me. I never got a daughter of my own. Guess the universe just made me wait a little longer than expected. The room went quiet in that good, full way. Priya pressed a napkin to her eyes. Marcus put his hand on my knee under the table. That Friday evening, 40 minutes across town, my father sat alone in his own garage. I didn't know this at the time. Priya told me weeks later, having heard it through a neighbor. He sat there on a folding stool, looking at a corkboard on the wall, pinned to, it was an old photo, me at 12, holding up a tomato from my backyard greenhouse, grinning like I'd personally invented sunlight. He'd hung that photo years ago and never taken it down, even after my mother made him tear the greenhouse itself apart. Are we still going tomorrow? My mother asked. Stepping into the garage around 9 that night, I think we should. Fine. But we sit in the back. I'm not going to let this turn into some kind of statement. My father opened his phone, started typing a message to me. I'm proud of you. Yossi. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he deleted every word, locked the phone, and went inside. Saturday morning, I woke at 5:30. The house was quiet and dark. Marcus had stayed at Sal's the night before tradition. He said, though I suspect it was mostly so his father wouldn't spend the whole night pacing the kitchen alone. I made coffee and sat on my back porch. My garden was still wrapped in early fog, lavender holding on even as everything else had started to fade with the season. My hands looked exactly like what they were, calluses from a potter's wheel. A thin white scar across my left thumb from a kiln accident years ago. A trace of clay I'd missed under one fingernail even after showering twice. These hands had built a greenhouse at 13. They'd thrown thousands of pieces of pottery. They'd built a business from nothing, one client at a time. They deserved this day exactly as much as anyone's ever had. I finished my coffee, got dressed, and drove to the venue, a converted orchard barn just outside town with open beam ceilings and string lights strung across every rafter. I'd made every centerpiece myself, hand-thrown ceramic vases filled with dahlias, rosemary, and sprigs of sage. Because my grandmother always said rosemary was for remembrance. At 11:45, there was a knock at the bridal suite door. Sal stood there in his new charcoal suit, hands still rough and scarred from decades of honest work. He saw me in my dress and went completely still. His eyes filled almost instantly. Oh, kid, he said, voice thick. Don't you dare cry. Sal, I just got my mascara done. I'm not crying. Must be dust in here. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small handmade box, a simple metal frame he'd welded himself, holding a boutonniere of dried sage and baby's breath wrapped in copper wire. Made it myself. He said, figured store flowers wouldn't feel right for you. I pinned it to his lapel with careful hands. You look beautiful. He said, then corrected himself. No, you look strong. Nobody had ever used that word for me on a day I was supposed to look pretty. And it was exactly the right one. At the appointed hour, I peeked through the curtain. Marcus's side of the barn was full aunts, uncles, co-workers from his firm. My side was smaller, but far from empty Marta up front. Priya and Denise, 7 women from my pottery class, 3 clients who'd become genuine friends over the years, and my accountant, who once told me my quarterly filings made her proud of me. Then I saw the back row, far right corner, my father staring at his shoes, my mother sitting rigid, purse in her lap like a shield. Camille beside her, scanning the room the way you'd scan a building for exits. They'd come. My stomach dropped for one stupid, reflexive second. Maybe they're here to make it right. Then I watched my mother lean over and whisper something to my father, and he nodded without lifting his eyes. And I understood they hadn't come for me. They'd come so they could say later that they had come. Attendance as an alibi. The string quartet started. My bridesmaids walked first. Then it was my turn. I took out my grandmother's letter one last time. Read the final line times the people who show up are your real family times, folded it, and closed my clutch. Sal stepped beside me and offered his arm. You good? I'm good. Then let's go show them what showing up actually looks like. The barn doors opened. Late afternoon light poured in. Gold and low. catching the dust in the air like it had been scattered on purpose. 200 heads turned. And there we were, a metal worker and a potter. No blood relation between us. Both exactly where we were supposed to be. I didn't look at the back row. Not once. I looked instead at Marta, dabbing her eyes in the front row, at Priya at the altar, hand over her mouth. At my pottery students, 3 of them openly crying. At Marcus, standing at the end of the aisle with wet eyes and a grin that said everything words wouldn't need to. I heard later that my father half rose from his seat and caught himself on the pew in front of him. My mother grabbed his arm. Camille stared straight ahead, an expression Marta later described as someone watching a door close that they knew they'd never get to reopen. When we reached the altar, the officiant asked the traditional question, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Sal cleared his throat. He's not a man who speaks to crowds, he builds for them. He fixes things for them. He feeds them Sunday dinner and sends them home with leftovers. But that day, he spoke, her family does. He said, then, quieter, like it was meant just for me, all of us who showed up. The room exhaled all at once. He turned to me, took both my hands, and squeezed once. Go get married. Kid. He placed my hand in Marcus's, stepped back, and took his seat in the chair labeled with his name, the seat my father was supposed to fill. The reception moved into the same barn a couple of hours later. Camille's daughter, Nora, ran between tables chasing a runaway balloon. My father found me near the dessert table while I was slicing into the lemon cake. I felt him step up beside me before I even turned around, that same aftershave he'd worn my entire life. Yosi. I turned. He was holding a glass of water, not champagne. That man, he said, nodding towards Sal, did a good job up there. His name is Sal. Sal. Yes, he did a good job. Silence. He looked at the cake, at the table, anywhere but my face. I wanted to say I'm sorry. He finally managed. I looked at him not with anger and not with forgiveness either. Just the flat, clear gaze of someone who'd spent 31 years watching a man choose the path of least resistance. Every single time. Sorry you missed it. I said, or sorry that everyone saw you miss it. He flinched. Small but real, the kind of flinch that only happens when someone says out loud what you've been thinking privately for days. My mother appeared before he could answer, hand on his elbow, steering him away. Don't make a scene. Yosi, she murmured as she turned him. I'm not making a scene. Mom, I'm cutting cake. She walked him away. He always follows. The father-daughter dance slot on the timeline became, instead, a dance between Sal and me, an acoustic cover of an old song that had Priya crying for the 3rd time that day. Sal danced carefully, like he was measuring every step, hand resting respectfully on my shoulder rather than my waist. Fair warning, I step on feet. He said, I know. Marcus warned me. Man has no loyalty. At the corner table, Camille watched. Derek, wasn't there a work trip? She'd told our mother, though I never confirmed it. Marta walked over and sat beside her. Not warm. Not cold. Just present. The way Marta does everything. Rosalind would have been so proud of Josie today. Marta said, Camille's eyes filled. She would have been proud of both of us. Marta added quietly, if you'd let her. Camille stood without a word and disappeared toward the restroom. She was gone almost 20 minutes. When she came back, her makeup was freshly done, but her eyes were swollen, and her hands were shaking the exact same way they'd shaken at Thanksgiving the year before. I didn't go after her. I kept dancing with Sal. Some doors close because you shut them yourself. Others close because the person standing on the other side simply stopped holding them open. I didn't see my parents leave. Priya told me later they slipped out sometime around 5. Between the cake cutting and the bouquet toss, the way you leave a party you were never really present at in the first place. Monday morning, 2 days after the wedding, I opened my studio at 7, same as always. A new commission was waiting on my desk, a custom dinnerware set for a children's therapy center. 40 place settings, soft colors, rounded edges. Marcus brought coffee at 8. Sal stopped by at 9 with a small iron plant hanger he'd finished for our new kitchen, as if he hadn't walked me down the aisle 2 days earlier, as if it were just another ordinary Monday. My phone buzzed at noon. One text from my father times. Can we talk? I read it, set the phone face down on my work table, and went back to my sketches. 2 weeks after the wedding, Camille called while I was on site measuring a kitchen for a custom tile order. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't. Derek moved out last week. She said, no greeting first. Took his things while I was at the store, left a note on the counter. I set my measuring tape down. Okay. Her voice cracked. Quiet. Not performed the way it usually was for our parents. I thought if I kept mom and dad's attention on me, it would fill the gap Derek left. The kids weren't enough on their own. I needed to be the center of something, and your wedding was in the way. My happiness was in the way. I said, silence. Then, softly, yeah. Camille, I hope you find whatever it is you actually need. I mean that, but I can't keep being the thing you push down so you can feel taller. She cried quietly. Let hair, then said goodbye and went back to work. A letter arrived from my father the following week, handwritten, mailed with an actual stamp. I opened it alone in my studio, standing beside the pottery stand Sal had welded for me. Josie, I should have walked you down that aisle. I knew it the moment your sister asked me not to. And I knew it again when your mother told me it would all be fine. I chose wrong. I've been choosing wrong for years and telling myself it was easier that way. It wasn't easier, it was just cowardly. I let your sister use those kids as a wall between us. And I let your mother convince me that keeping the peace was the same thing as being a good father. It never was. Sal earned what I let slip away because he showed up. And I don't expect you to forgive me. And honestly, I'm not sure I'd forgive me either. I just want you to know the photo of you holding that tomato is still on my garage wall. And I wish I'd told you 1,000 times before now, I am proud of you. Josie, I always have been. I was just too afraid to say it out loud. Dad, I read it twice, folded it, and placed it in the drawer beside my grandmother's letter. 2 letters, 2 very different weights. I haven't replied yet. Maybe someday I will. I used to believe family meant the people you were born to, the ones who share your blood, your last name, your holiday table. I don't believe that anymore. Family is the man who drives 40 minutes to your studio on a Saturday to fix something you never asked him to fix. Family is a letter from a grandmother who's been gone 9 years, arriving at exactly the moment you need it most. Family is whoever shows up, over and over, without being asked twice. That's my story. 4 days of silence, 1 letter from my grandmother, and a metal worker who said yes before I even finished asking the question. If this reminded you that family is a choice and not just an obligation, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'll see you in the next one.